Changing Expectations, written by KK Slider. Chapter 3, Anesidora.
This is my life now.
I was still in the pile of larvae, the center of the veritable mountain of changelings. At 2 feet tall, we were the highest point in the nursery. At least until the 2 changeling drones that first accompanied the queen returned to the room. One noticed me staring and paused mid-step, returning the stare. She leaned to the side and whispered to her companion, who also halted and stared. They were each carrying something, using the same telekinesis that the queen used to pick me up. Large black jars. The top of them had no lid. I could see a light pink glow emanating outwards, a stark contrast to the, at this point nauseating, lime green light that the changelings love to shine on literally everything. Apparently, the workforce prioritized monologuing, evil-looking queen positions before interior designers. Or they were all colorblind. I caught the same taste, smell, and feel of love as the drones carried the jars closer to my fortress of chitin. But the jars couldn't be filled with the stuff. I'd had sensed the potent emotion the moment they carried them into the room. Perhaps the love was watered down or baked into whatever baby food the jars must be filled with. At least, I assumed it was food for us chubby changelings.
Larva food.
Around me, my living defenses started to stir, shaking sleep from their tiny heads. The larvae started to stretch and wiggle, awakening their 2 limbs while trying to blink away the sleep from their eyes. It was kinda cute to watch, if you squinted, like really squinted, and pretended not to be revolted. And then they started hissing and headbutting, and it stopped being cute and returned to completely outlandish. Despite the fact that I had been reincarnated as an emotion-eating bug horse royal that had mysterious voices whispering thoughts into my head, I felt that I was taking my new life quite well.
I guess food is the way to my heart. I should really be screaming and panicking though. Maybe the voices prevent me from panicking.
Speaking of voices, the chittering seemed to quiet down a bit every time they planted thoughts into my head. Again, another sentence that should send me into a tin hat wearing craze. This was not the first time I reviewed my current situation. Questioning my new world and lack of existential crises was the only way I could pass time at the moment. Luckily, the 2 changeling adults rescued me from my newfound boredom. Then the quiet chittering started to rise. Brood nurse Lethoceris froze when she saw the orange eyes staring at her from the pile of young changelings.
Barely a day old and he's already giving me heart attacks. I like it better when he was hissing and moving about, like normal larvae.
In her periphery, she noticed Sokid also stopped.
He's far more attentive than any larva I've ever raised.
Lethoceris whispered.
And he's just as foreboding as his mother.
Sokid replied, barely audible. Their cargo roused the young larvae. The dull taste of love gel started to permeate from the open jars they carried. The nurses smiled as the larvae started to stretch and play with each other. It warmed Lethoceris' heart to see the tiny headbutting and adorable hisses. When the nurses set the jars down, the little changelings started to crawl their way over. Lethoceris and Sokid dutifully began to take globs of love jelly out of the jars using their magic, and started to dole out each orb to the larvae. The larvae fought each other to get fed first, but in the end, all were fed. All except the little prince, who did not move from his spot, even when finally free of his young companions. He just stared. It was time for the first weave. Sokid levitated him over, setting Prince Phasma in front of her. Around the nurses, the larvae had finished eating, and resuming the oh-so-fierce territorial displays that started when they first woke. Lethoceris started to speak, capturing the attention of the prince. Sokid began.
Once, we were nothing.
and called forth the ancient lore.
Yes, indeed.
Lethoceros answered,
When the world was naught but strings, floating in dust, all dwelled within these strings, separate, deaf, blind. With no air to sing, their voices could not travel between the strings. No thoughts were shared between beings.
Sokid spoke.
But with strange eons, nothing became something.
Remembering the old lessons, Sokid pulled. Lethoceros answered,
Panarthropo, the great weaver, came from beyond all. They plucked the strings from their places and wove them together. For 11 days and 11 nights, Panarthropo weaved the world together. Rock joined rock and became mountains. Power and change joined to form time. Moved and life fashioned into water, and so all was woven.
This was easier than Sokid remembered. A glance at the being at her hooves answered her question of why.
But one was forgotten.
Changelings
The other Broodner spoke.
hung drearily to the end of their thread. All others, the ponies, the griffins, the sheep, had been woven. The changelings had not. The thread of together hung limp below the great tapestry.
They learned to weave.
Heard, Sokid. If only a royal was present for every first lesson.
With threads so thin they could not be seen, changelings wove themselves in onto magic, onto emotion, onto change, onto 5 others. From the thread of together, the first weave was created.
As Sokid and Lethoceros began to speak in their changeling tongue, the whispers and chitters of the weave rose to match. The words flowed in one ear and out the other, but the meanings were caught. The chirping and chittering resolved itself into words. Strings, Panarthropal, mountains, time, water. Each time when the weave started to quiet, Sokid would stoke the fire once again. Together, magic, emotion, change. The first weave was created. Even though the whole story was not heard by Phasma, he understood it. It was a neat story, and it ended with a phrase very similar to one from Earth.
As it is woven, so it shall be.
Thought the prince. The brood nurses stared, slack-jawed, at Prince Phasma. Sokid let the first lesson slip away, more out of shock than the fact that it was done. Even the larva, who had only felt a pull from the weave rather than heard it, had stopped and stared, unmoving. His Highness had finished the first lesson, not Sokid.
Fetch the queen.
Queen Chrysalis was splayed over a stone chair, carved from the black igneous rock her drones had carried back in slabs from lands distant. The seat and back were padded with real wool and fabric. One of the perks of being the undisputed voice of authority was first, second, and third pick of the loot the infiltrators brought back with them. She was looking down on a map of Equestria lying on the table in front of her. It was a useless effort. She had already studied its faded yellow visage inch by inch. Chrysalis had even committed it to memory. But sitting in this comfy chair, brooding over a faded map, brought her some semblance of comfort. She would occasionally accent her alone time with some evil cackling, if she was feeling creative. Then, as all great and totally benevolent monarchs do, she began to monologue to herself.
I...
But a loud knock on her study's door interrupted. With a pained groan, Chrysalis put her head in her hooves.
This had better be important.
A muffled voice responded.
My queen, there has been an incident.
Open the door, you incapable waste of chitin!
At once, my queen!
An armored drone shouted as he opened the door. He saluted and stood at attention.
Oh, by the...
Chrysalis groaned yet again.
Now you may tell me your message.
My queen, there has been an incident in the nursery. The broodmothers requested your presence.
The queen hummed.
Ah, right. The prince. He must have gotten aggressive when he was not fed with the lower drones.
The guard shook his head.
No, my queen. The incident was during the first lesson.
Chrysalis slowly straightened up and turned to face the guard.
The first lesson?
Changing Expectations. Written by KK Slider. Chapter 4. Olympus.
You're telling me that Prince Phasma spoke?
Queen Chrysalis asked. Having been fed and sat through story time, the young charges of Lethoceros and Sokid decided it was playtime. Though a few wiggled about around Prince Phasma, the majority scaled the, by their point of view, sheer cliff faces that were Queen Chrysalis's legs.
Yes, my queen. Through the weave.
Lethoceros clarified.
Through the weave.
Yes, my queen. During the first lesson, he finished it, saying the ending stanza. His Highness accessed the information directly from the weave and finished the poem before Broodner Sokid could.
Chrysalis stared at the attentive prince.
That's not possible. A mere larva, speaking through the weave.
Lethoceros shifted on her hooves and glanced at Sokid. Luckily, Sokid took the hint.
We were under the impression that using the weave to communicate was a trait common to all royalty, my queen.
Her Majesty tore her gaze away from Phasma to address Sokid.
That is correct. But being able to communicate at the larva stage, that has never happened. Princes and princesses learn to speak at the nymph stage, and verbally first.
Chrysalis is being very forthcoming with information.
Lethoceros thought. After the prince spoke, Lethoceros and Sokid checked the weave for information on the life cycle of the royals. They could not find anything.
She's even been here for 5 minutes and hasn't even threatened us. This must be something really serious.
The queen glanced back towards the nascent prince. Before feeding Prince Phasma, Queen Chrysalis decided she would get to the bottom of this. A larva speaking? Preposterous! Impossible! These nurses must be delusional. No larva has ever possessed the intelligence to speak. Even her own offspring, or from what the records say, any changing royal only started communicating at the nymph stage. She would have to visit the archives later to double check. There was no time today. If they had interrupted her precious relaxation time for a mere misunderstanding, there would be hell to pay. Of all the resources the Hive possessed, her time was the most precious, the most coveted.
Let's see if there is merit to their madness. I can always think of punishments later.
She moved closer to Phasma and spoke through the weave.
Prince Phasmotodea, what is my name?
The larva tilted his head to the side, but otherwise did not respond. Thinking back, she might have neglected to introduce herself. Well, that's something that had to be corrected immediately.
I am Queen Chrysalis, ruler of the 4th Hive Dynasty. I am your progenitor. Now, repeat back to me my name.
Still nothing. The nurses did mention that he spoke during the first lesson. During the lesson, one brood nurse uses the weave and broadcasts the information for the listeners to access through their own connection. It was how all larvae started to learn how to use the weave. Quickly, she thought up a test for her prince. She brought up on the weave Phasma, Chrysalis, Dynasty, and Progenitor. Then she leaned closer down to Phasma.
Phasma, Chrysalis, Dynasty.
Chrysalis spoke out loud and waited.
Chrysalis.
Phasma spoke through the weave.
Impossible!
The queen shot upright, dislodging a few larvae that clung to her. Rather than saying progenitor, the word that was left unsaid, or expectedly silent, the prince had answered Chrysalis. Chrysalis's mind raced with possibilities, implications, and ideas. This changes everything.
Prince Phasmodare will be in my direct care from now on.
Queen Chrysalis addressed the other two changelings in the room, actually capable of speech.
Verbal speech.
She unconsciously corrected herself. Chrysalis regurgitated some love from her personal stores for Phasma. The pure love would accelerate his growth. She decided to personally feed him every day, before and after giving him lessons, instead of having love delivered for him. That would reinforce her position in his life as provider of everything under the sun.
Or would it? He seems to be quite intelligent. This is the most interesting phenomenon I have ever seen since Lieutenant Colonel Acrid exploded during the last war games. No, definitely longer than that.
Chrysalis, as I now know her name was, opened her mouth and the love flowed outwards again. Again I drank in the wonderful pink cloud. The familiar senses of complete euphoria filled my being, just as warm and filling as the first time, and I slumped over.
So this is why people do drugs. They're amazing.
She then picked me up and placed me on her back, using her telekinesis. That was a really neat trick that I needed to learn as soon as possible. This whole lack of fingers thing hadn't been a problem so far. But I mean, it's telekinesis. Who wouldn't want telekinesis? Bugmom also removed the other larva from her, then turned and left the room with me still on her back. Field trip. Viewing the journey in reverse, the first thing I noticed was the cold. As soon as we left the nursery, I was hit by a freezing breeze. They must keep the nursery very warm for the developing changelings. I huddled closer to Chrysalis' neck for warmth in a vain attempt to escape the biting cold. As we exited through the door, made of the same black material as the walls, I saw two changeling guards standing on either side of the door, awash in the now blue light coming from the scones on the walls. They saluted as we passed them, crossing their left hoof across their chest. These changelings wore blue armor, but I couldn't tell the metal. Their helmet cheek guards resembled mandibles of a beetle. They also had some sort of chest piece covering their neck and the space between their forelegs. Onwards my noble steed carried me, through turns and junctions, rooms with unknown purposes, and passing changelings along the way. Most did not wear armor, though occasionally I saw a door with one or two guards posted by them. The changelings we did pass I saw were bowed, probably doing so when they saw their queen passing by. A few, especially the guards who did not have to bow, saw me watching from Chrysalis' back. My knowledge on horse body language may be underdeveloped, but it was easy to see their confusion or shock. We were climbing high, I realized after the third staircase. Higher, higher, yet higher. Less and less changelings occupied the rooms and halls we made our way through, and more guards were making their way through the hall. A few of them had a purple armor, as well as what I guess constituted as vambraces and boots. There was a 9-pointed star on their chest, which was probably important. They also had 9 pieces that covered the rest of their torsos, unlike the other guards. Apparently, only these guards were allowed protection from literally any other direction than straight ahead. One final staircase later, and we were in a grand hall, complete with a red polished stone path set in the middle and great vaulted opened windows on either side. I saw sunlight for the first time in this new life. It was warm in here, though not as warm as the nursery. We were at the top of the hive spire, yet I did not hear the rushing wind normally associated with heights. The contentment of the love had slowly ebbed away, allowing me enough presence of mind to notice a slight blue shimmer in the glassless windows. Curious. The sounds of clanking metal and creaking hinges suddenly filled the room. We then passed through a pair of massive doors, which must have just opened. The doors were covered in carvings and colors, but my attention was elsewhere. We were in a throne room. That was the only explanation I had for the massive vaulted ceiling, the even bigger, though less wide windows, and various black, blue, and green tapestries of an unknown material that hung from warped rafter support beams, and on every space-twisted column. More royal guards in purple armor stood at attention in this room, at least 12 in total. The tapestries depicted changelings bedecked in the rather purple armor, normal ponies lying prone, and other species I could identify from myth alone. Griffins, pegasi, and unicorns that were the same size as the normal ponies, buffalo, and dragons. Before I could wonder about the existence of these fantasy creatures and normal small horses, we sidestepped a large stone throne. It sat atop a raised pedestal, flanked by large, smooth black braziers. The throne itself was made of a different material than the walls. It was a dark blue wide seat with a back that was 5 feet high, with a 9-pointed star made of 9 teardrop-shaped sapphires, their tapered points facing outwards, the symbol of Panarthropal. A skylight from behind draped the seat in a golden light, far more golden than natural sunlight.
All of the decorating budget went into this room, it seems.
A slow creak signaled the opening of another door, and we passed through an arched doorway with a blue stone filigree scorpion on its center. The room inside was a small hallway, this one with orangish yellow lights atop cones that jutted out parallel to the wall like a torch. It was a far cry from the private chambers of the obscenely rich European monarchs, but compared to the rest of the hive, it might as well have been covered in gold and jewels. Seriously, how could this area be so well designed and with so much comparative wealth put in when the rest of the place seemed to be a literal cave?
Oh, right. Absolute monarchy. Screw the poor and all that.
This hallway had a few doorways that were arched, but lacking the scorpion symbol. Chrysalis brought us through the door at the end and into a personal study. It was a smaller study, I guessed, though I had no experience with personal studies of ruling monarchs. Still, it was spacious enough, with a black rock chair with white upholstery sitting behind a wooden desk covered in papers, empty inkwells, and a few empty pots. To the left, a wooden bookshelf filled with worn tomes. To the right, a couch and 2 chairs that seemed completely nondescript faced each other. They sat in front of an empty fireplace with a large silver mirror above it.
Their mere existence is fancy enough for Queen Chrysalis, I suppose.
I was moved from Chrysalis's back and put down onto the couch. She sat in one of the opposite chairs, looked at me, and sighed.
Prince Phasma, you will be staying with me from now on. Your tutelage will begin tomorrow.
Tutelage?
Aw, hell. School again? I knew there was a catch to being reincarnated as an emotion-eating, half-caterpillar, half-bug-horse prince.